Well, hey everybody, it's Real Honesty with John Retlin. Here is a double retro review of NWA WCW Clash of Champions 5, St. Valentine's Massacre, and Chi-Town Rumble 1989, and mainly because these events are so close together, and Clash of Champions 5, probably the weakest Clash of Champions up to this point. Now, yes, there'd only been 4 others, but the 4 in 88 had at least one pretty good match, even 2 really good matches, and in the case of number 1, had a really, really damn good match between Sting and Flair. And there were others, sprinkled out through. But this is during the infamous George Scott era, and you check out Jim Cornette's interviews. He's had a lot to say about George Scott, and you could tell that the guy didn't know what the fuck he was doing anymore. But this was just taking place right before Chi-Town Rumble, and the reason double review, Clash of Champions 5, missing out on this one, or at least out on most of it, is not going to haunt you till your dying days. JR Magnum TA on commentary. Hey, run down the card. We start off with Midnight Express with Jim Cornette as babyfaces versus Russian Assassins with Paul Jones. It was decent enough. It was actually probably was pretty close to the best match on the card, honestly, because they would always tear it up. They would always do some really, really good stuff. Or at least it was co-match of the night. But Midnight Express and Cornette were heading into a 6-man tag with the original Midnight Express, sort of, at the Chi-Town Rumble with the loser leaves NWA match. So were they going to get a much needed win? Yeah, because Stan Lane got in some good karate moves. The Russian Assassins, which were the Angel of Death and Jack Victory, I believe, they were wearing masks, so they were able to use dirty tactics and be like, oh yeah, we tagged in even though they both look different. Well, they're wearing masks, so we have to look through that logic loophole. They were doing some good double teaming and heel tactics to beat up Stan Lane and keep Stan Lane out of the corner from tagging Bobby Eaton. Once Bobby Eaton got tagged, though, soon after, hit the rocket launcher, Stan Lane launching Bobby Eaton off of the top for the splash for the 1-2-3. It was pretty cool, and it was nice they got a much-needed win. And then we have Ricky and Little Ricky. Real shame what happened to Little Ricky, Richie Steamboat, I believe. Real shame what happened to him, honestly, like injuries and stuff like that. But Ricky Steamboat and his little boy were having an interview. Obviously, Little Ricky didn't say anything. It was an anti-drug, anti-corruption promo, and Ricky Steamboat really got the feet cut out from under him, like just doing this kind of stuff. Being a family man isn't a bad thing, but facing Ric Flair is such a cool heel. But it was what it was, and Ricky Steamboat, one of the best baby faces of all time. We then get Steve Casey versus Hacksaw Butch Reed. Steve Casey could do some shit and actually had a pretty good look and was pretty good in the ring. Overall, he wasn't any more than like a mid-card guy, but he had a pretty good look. Butch Reed sort of wiped the goddamn floor with him. I'm just going to say it right here. I mean, and nothing against Casey. I don't think he was around the company very long. I think he was around for maybe a couple years, mostly as an enhancement talent. Butch Reed, at this point, I think 2 years later, would be mostly out of the business after teaming with Ron Simmons as Doom to get, Ron Simmons mostly over. It was what it was, though. It served its purpose, but it took too long, too many chin locks. Yes, Casey did get in some good moves, and I'm not saying he shouldn't have, but this match should have been cut down by about 5 minutes. There was a nice big shoulder block from the top. 1-2-3, Butch Reed got the victory. Again, this match should have been half of what it was. It went on way, way too long and too many rest holds. I guess sometimes the rest holds are needed, bring the crowd down and bring the crowd back into it. This just didn't work here. Then we get a Ric Flair promo. He's hyping up facing Ricky Steamboat. He's got a bunch of women with him. Offers a woman to Steamboat, but Steamboat's backstage. Offers a woman to Bob Caudle. Bob Caudle, pretty underrated wrestling announcer, and I feel bad for forgetting him on a recent show that I did. Maybe I'll revisit that at some point and talk about more underrated wrestling announcers or underappreciated wrestling announcers. But anyway, so Steamboat eventually comes out because Flair just keeps egging him on. They brawl. Flair gets his clothes pretty much torn to shreds. They chop each other like crazy. I mean, they really chop each other like damn hard. And this is just a few days before their big match. And then you get Hiro Matsuda, which I don't know why he was managing Flair. And I love Hiro Matsuda. He's trained some of the best wrestlers in the world. He trained some of the best wrestlers in the world. And Lex Luger. But, and some of the biggest stars in the world. He even trained Hogan. Or had a hand train Hogan. It was what it was, and it was a pretty cool brawl. It was actually the best thing on the show, maybe besides the opening tag match. And then we get Lex Luger versus the Blackmailer, who was with Hiro Matsuda. So Hiro Matsuda probably just stayed out there. They had the Blackmailers, Jack Victory, and this was a showcase for Lex Luger to basically show that he could match Barry Windham for his skills because they were going to face off for the NWA US title. Not very good. It was some side headlock work. There was a big superplex, which is Barry Windham's finishing maneuver. Lex Luger hits that for the 1-2-3. Rick Steiner promo. He was never good with words. I mean, I'm not saying I'm good with words, but Rick Steiner was never good with words. The Fantastics versus Mike Rotunda and Dr. Death Steve Williams for the U.S. tag titles. Pretty good stuff. Good wrestling. Speed versus power. Clearly, I mean, and there was some good amateur skills on Rotunda's end. But Williams, just an absolute beast. I mean, just a natural, hard hitter and everything. Just a great athlete. Him and Gordy were a hell of a tag team in Japan. In the end, there was a distraction that did lead to Williams pinning Bobby Fulton. But this is a pretty good match. Actually, the tag team matches may have been the best out of the whole damn show. So, yeah, the Fantastics always put on a good match. And then we get to Bob Bradley versus Ricky Steamboat. It was Ricky Steamboat winning tune-up matches, not to take it easy. He wanted matches where he could face some suitable competition. And there were a lot of loud "We Won Flair" chants, and Steamboat ended up using the high crossbody to get the victory. This wasn't very good. It just was. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't very good. And then we get Rick Steiner versus Rip Morgan, not Rip Rogers, because Rip Morgan actually had talent. Sorry, never cared for Rip. I just don't get the appeal of Rip Rogers. I just don't. That's just my opinion. Training-wise, I'm not speaking on training-wise. I'm speaking of what I saw in the ring. That's just my take. Rip got in a few moves, but Steiner won easily. Nice belly-to-belly suplex for the win. Sting, JYD, and Michael Hayes are backstage, excited to face the Road Warriors and Tenryu for the six-man tag titles. And then they go downstairs for some reason. And then they get locked in some gated area. I don't understand. And so, yeah, then the Varsity Club take the place of them, which I guess apparently you could do in George Scott's NWA. And, yeah, the Road Warriors and Tenryu versus the Varsity Club. And basically they brawled. And then eventually Sting, JYD, and Hayes got freed. They come out, big old schmoz. And that's pretty much the end of that. That was a hot end to the show, I will say that much. And that was pretty impressive. But, I don't usually grade these things, but it was about a C. Honestly, it was about a C. Like, it's average. The tag matches are pretty damn good. Six-man tag, they didn't pace this very well. It was kind of thrown together. But now we're going to move on to NWA WCW Chi-Town Rumble 89. Where after you got past the first two matches, which weren't bad, but they went on a bit long, the pay-per-view did really pick up. So we get JR Magnum TA on commentary again, opening video package, showing some stuff with all these guys. Michael Hayes promo, he yelled a lot. He yelled a lot. He didn't say what he said to Mark Henry a number of years later, and yeah, I'm not going to let that go, even though there was apologies. But yeah, that happened. Bob Caudle, it was sad how he got reduced to doing backstage interview stuff, but maybe he didn't want to do commentary anymore. I have no idea. Even though he would do commentary later, I mean, him and JR would call some of, actually, I think they would call Great American Bash 89 together. We think of Michael Hayes versus Russian Assassin 1, which I don't remember that was Jack Victory or the Angel of Death. It wasn't a badly worked match, but it was too long. It was like 15 plus. It was almost 16 minutes. This match should have been about 11 minutes. You could have slotted another match in or given a little more time to a couple others, but it was what it was. There was some good arm work. Assassin did target the ribs and the neck. There was a sleeper hold. Couple Russian sickle clotheslines with that and keep Hayes down. In the end, Hayes did make his comeback, hit the DDT, 1, 2, 3, got the victory. Not a bad match, just not a great match. It, again, could have been cut down a little bit, and I don't think they would have missed anything if they had had 4 or 5 minutes cut off of this. Because there wasn't enough heat with this, at least as far as I recall. I don't recall these guys being, big rivals. But it was what it was. And Hayes was a babyface. Weird to see Michael Hayes as a babyface when he was a much better heel. And then we get Ricky Steamboat with his family. He said at one point, with my held up high, instead of my head held up high. Whatever. Steamboat was probably nervous. Even though he'd been in big matches before. He had semi-retired like in 88 and was only going to come back to the NWA. Now, I don't blame him because he probably didn't want to go back to WWE after the way they treated him. But it was what it was. It was just more hype for his match with Flair. Then we get Sting versus Hacksaw Butch Reed. Hiro Matsuda. Hiro Matsuda managed so many people at random. I mean, I know they were heels, but Butch Reed, Flair, the Blackmailer, just various people. I mean, Hiro Matsuda, again, trained a whole lot of people, and I get why they'd want to use a guy with his legendary status, but come on. A hodgepodge of heels, I just didn't understand. I sort of understood Flair, even though Flair could talk for himself, so he didn't really need a manager. He was more of the benefactor. They were trying to make him like a J.J. Dillon. But anyway, I digress. We have an experience versus, fiery, up-and-comer guy, even though Sting had gotten much more established in the past year. Were some rest holds, could have done without all the rest holds and everything. Reed did ground him. Again, more rest holds. Chin locks. There was a rolling, roll-up sunset flip roll-up. 1, 2, 3. This is after Butch Reed had tried to get his hand on the rope to hold it. Teddy Long kicked it away, and 1, 2, 3. So Sting gets a victory. They brawl some afterwards. And Paulie dangerously with Randy Rose and Jack Victory, because Dennis Condrey had found out, because Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose were the original Midnight Express. He had found out that, I guess, I believe it was Jim Crockett when he was briefly the booker after Dusty had been fired before they got George Scott. If I recall correctly, he wasn't a fan of Randy Rose's work, so he's going to find Condrey a new partner. So that messed up the whole Midnight versus original Midnight thing. Well, Dennis Condrey decided he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to show up. He wanted to come in and have it be original Midnight versus current, new Midnight. So Dennis didn't show up. So Randy Rose is there, and then they got Jack Victory as just a sub, for Dennis Condrey. So Jack Victory, who's not a bad talent or anything, but it was what it was. It was messy, but still, they did the best they could. And Jack Victory wrestled a lot. Jack Victory wrestled a lot in these past, couple days. I mean, he wrestled once in the Assassins tag team, then one more as the Blackmailer, and then on this show, he's wrestling, subbing for Dennis Condrey. But yeah, then we get Midnight Express, Stan Lane, Bobby Eaton, and Jim Cornette versus the original Midnight, sort of original Midnight. Randy Rose, Jack Victory, and Paul Heyman. And mainly this was about, it was some great tag work. Actually, Rose and Victory worked pretty damn well together. I will say that, for maybe not teaming up all that much. And Rose, for probably being on the downside of his career, still put in a great, great performance. I mean, I'm sure he wrestled a number of years after this, but he'd been wrestling for years and years before. Lane and Eaton did very, very well, of course. This is all about what would happen when Heyman and Cornette got their hands on each other. And sometimes Heyman would get the advantage. Then Cornette would make his comeback, this kind of stuff. Cornette eventually would get his hands on him. It was a loser leaves the NWA match, basically whoever lost the fall. Not the entire team, but whoever lost the fall. There was some good drama. Eaton was targeted after getting sent into the guardrail. Heyman and Cornette did brawl. Lane beats up some. He tagged, he gets beat up some after he's tagged. Eaton gets tagged back in after, recovering from that guardrail spot. He gets Heyman tagged, and then Cornette beats him up. And then eventually, there's a big schmoz at the end. And a double flapjack, and Randy Rose gets pinned. So Randy Rose must leave the NWA, and the new Midnight Express, or the current Midnight Express, stay together. And Heyman, of course, I think then they made Jack Victory Secret Service Jack Victory. Jack Victory had so many goddamn gimmicks. It was a mess. This was, though, however, a pretty damn good match. It was really, really enjoyable. Because if you get tag team wrestling and actually if you have good tag teams and give them a chance to actually show what the fuck they can do, it's hard to beat that. Imagine that concept. Tag team wrestling actually meaning something in a big company. Hint, hint to WWE. Not that anybody from WWE is watching this. Not that there aren't good tag teams, but still. Anyway, Rick Steiner versus Mike Rotunda for the TV title in a rematch of Starrcade 88. Kevin Sullivan was also at ringside with Mike Rotunda, but yeah, this is where Rick Steiner previously had won the title and then ran around the ring like he won the World Series or something. That was pretty funny. Good wrestling, good strikes. Did feel very personal. Former Varsity Club members, they did pretty well. There were a couple close near falls. I actually thought that Rick Steiner was going to get the victory. I knew what happened, but still, they drew me back in. Sullivan then distracts him, and even though Scott Steiner's at ringside and could have done something about it, Kevin Sullivan says, "Oh, Rick, that's a lovely dog you got backstage. You'd pretty much be ashamed if something happened to it." That kind of stuff. It almost sounded like, a mobster. Instead of telling Scott, "Hey, Scott, why don't you go back there and make sure that my dog's not hurt?" Rick Steiner does not do that. He's like, "Oh, panicked," and then goes back in the ring. And he does end up getting a sleeper hold where, he's on the mat, and, it's like a rear naked choke almost, but Rotunda's on top of him. Well, Rotunda's shoulders aren't to the mat. Rick's are. So, 1, 2, 3. Rick ends up, thinking he won because Rotunda tapped out. Nope. Rotunda ended up pinning Rick's shoulders to the mat. Rick basically ended up pinning himself. So that happened. New TV champion. Rotunda, I believe, would end up dropping it to Sting soon after this. Because then he would become Captain Mike Rotunda, which worked out so well. And then he would leave the NWA and go to being IRS and WWF, at the time. for a number of years before coming back to WCW and being VK Wall Street. Yes. Anyway, there's so many inside jokes with so many of those gimmicks. But yeah, we get a new TV champion, so two titles have it's like one title's changed hands, and then we get another title that changes hands. Because we get Luger versus Barry Windham for the U.S. title. I've never been a fan of Lex Luger, as many of you guys know, but I will say this: he has put on some good performances when he's with the right opponents. And Barry Windham, when Barry was motivated, because let's be honest, Barry was so good he could coast quite often. There were some really, really good moments, like in a lot of Luger matches. So, was what it was. Power moves aplenty, as you would expect. Windham did at one point, injure his claw hand, like in a ring post spot, and looked like he might have actually, I don't think he broke it, but he might have damaged it, because there was blood coming out of his hands, unless they put a blood capsule in that, in that glove for, the right time for it to get hit. It looked like he really hurt it, and he was selling it. There was a nice superplex that Barry did eventually hit off the top, but for 2, because his hand was still injured. There was a nice German suplex pin, double pin and everything that Barry hit. But Luger got his shoulder up first, and Barry didn't get his shoulders up. So Barry's thinking, okay, I won. Nope. It's the second pseudo screwy double pin, double finish thing where Luger ended up winning the U.S. title. And Luger basically I think this was Luger's first U.S. title win, because I don't think he won it in 87. Actually, no, I think he did. I think he won it from Nikita. But anyway, that's enough of that. Barry did end up, losing, and I think Barry was gone from the company very soon after this. They had a lot of talent overturned, and then Barry went back to WWF, and then came back to WCW soon after. He bounced around way too much. It was what it was. Windham did end up hitting a pile driver, though, on the title belt afterwards. And I believe Hiro Matsuda was at ringside with Windham, which is funny. You get Hiro Matsuda there at ringside managing somebody against somebody that he helped train. I don't know. It's just nice to find out those little facts and stuff. Road Warriors versus Kevin Sullivan and Dr. Death Steve Williams for the tag titles. Excuse me. The NWA tag titles. And it was what it was. It wasn't bad. Loud LOD chants that they were in Chi-Town, Chicago, if you don't know. The Road Warriors billed from being from Chicago. The Warriors did use power, of course. Varsity Club did use good heel tag work. They mainly, kept holding the foot and holding the leg of Animal to try and keep him away. But they, Hawk ends up getting tagged. They go, he goes nuts. And then they do another double pin thing. So Sullivan and Hawk are the legal guys. Williams and Animal are not. Williams gets a pin on Animal right after Hawk had hit a shoulder, a big old clothesline from the top. So the two legal guys, Hawk covers Sullivan. Then Williams covers Animal. So 1, 2, 3, and the ref does like 2, 3 counts. Or like, 2 simultaneous 3 counts almost. I think he meant to do 2 simultaneous 3 counts, but it was a little weird. But anyway, what ends up happening is obviously since Sullivan and Hawk were the legal guys, Sullivan ends up getting pinned. The tag titles stay on the Road Warriors. There were a bit of goofy finishes here and this kind of stuff, and like, who won, who lost, and everything, even though we could tell who the fuck won and who lost. It was unnecessary to do all that kind of booking. And then we get to Ricky Steamboat versus Ric Flair in the first of their epic trilogy from '89. They had some great matches over the TV title and U.S. title from the late 70s and early 80s, and I hope they start putting more of those up on the network. I found some on YouTube, and I don't remember how I found them, but they were pretty good stuff. But what the fuck do you want me to say about this NWA heavyweight title match? Go watch it. It's a fucking awesome match. It's like you can't find a bad Ricky Steamboat versus Ric Flair match. In fact, one match of theirs that is pretty underrated was from Spring Stampede in '94, right before Steamboat retired, or a few months before Steamboat retired. It was a fantastic match. It was a well-worked match, as you would expect, and often a forgotten classic among those guys. But this match, it was like just picture perfect. It was a perfect mix of real sport with wrestling and sports entertainment. They were able to keep it entertained, keep the pace rolling. They didn't slow down. They went a mile a minute. And even when things briefly slowed down, they picked it right back up. They kept the drama going. And there were a bunch of Chicago Bears players at the time that were big Ric Flair fans. And including even one in the crowd that he didn't factor into the finish, but his reaction did. But looked like Ricky was going to get the victory, and then Flair would almost look like he's going to get the victory. And it was 23 minutes. Now, I want you to keep in mind, the Butch Reed versus Sting match was about 20 minutes. This match was only 23 minutes. And I'm not saying like I want him to go like a goddamn hour, but if you would cut a few minutes off of Hayes versus Russian Assassin 1 and a few minutes off of Sting versus Butch Reed, this match could have easily been 30 minutes. And I think they might have even been able to tell a better story. This might be the least of the matches that they had, and it's still a goddamn 5-star match. And yes, it is, because the crowd was absolutely electric. It was fantastic. It was so well done. It was a great match. I might have to watch it again at work today. But it was such a great, great match. Ricky Steamboat ends up missing the crossbody. Ric Flair goes for, I believe, the figure 4. And then gets an inside, Ricky Steamboat gets an inside cradle on him. And Teddy Long jumps in because Tommy Young was hurt at the time. 1, 2, 3, and that one Chicago Bears player I talked about's in the front row just was like, oh, because he realized who the hell, what the hell just happened, that his favorite wrestler lost the title. And it was what it was. It was funny. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. So yeah, there we go. That was actually a pretty solid pay-per-view. I mean, yeah, a bit too many fluky, goofy finishes, double pins and that kind of stuff. But still, from the third match up, it was a pretty solid pay-per-view. And that main event was absolutely goddamn tremendous. So, yeah, that's what I got to say. Leave in the comments what you guys think. Let me know if there's some other retro reviews you want me to do. Keep in mind, look at stuff on the network. And look at stuff if it's been 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 25, 30, or even 35. Something like that. I will be willing to do that kind of stuff. Now, if it's stuff from the 70s, I could try to do that, but I may not know all the storylines. I mean, I try to study up on everything. But anyway, that's what I gotta say. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what I said? Like, share, subscribe. Twitter handle in the description. Spend real honesty with John Ritlin. I will see you soon.